Hi there, my name is Nicole Young. In this video, I'll be walking through the steps of creating a photo book inside of the Lightroom book module. I'll be demonstrating how to do it by creating a recipe book, and I'll be showing how to add text, photos, change the layout, and so much more. Let's get started. Before I actually start making the book inside of Lightroom, the first thing I like to do is kind of gather the images I'd like to use inside of a collection. I've already created a collection here called Recipe Images, and I have some photos already added into the collection. To create a collection, simply click the plus icon on that top right there, and then select Create Collection. Give it a name, and then you can start adding photos into it. And I have a few more photos I'd like to add, so I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple of different ways that you can go about doing that. I'll access my most recent food photo shoot, and then I'm going to go ahead and filter this so I'm only seeing those picked images that I've already edited. So at the very bottom right there, I'm going to click that filter icon to expand and view all of those filter options. And then I'll click that left flag icon until all of the picked images appear. The first way you can add a photo into a collection is simply by dragging and dropping. Click on a photo or a group of photos that you'd like to add to your collection, and then drag it over to the collection and release. And then that photo will be added into the collection. Another way to add your photos into collection is to set your collection as the target collection. I'll go ahead and do that. Simply right-click over the collection you want to work with, and then select Set as Target Collection. As soon as you do that, a little plus icon will appear to the right of it. And now all you need to do is use a keyboard shortcut to either add or remove photos to the collection. So as a demonstration, I still have that photo that I just added into the collection selected, so it's already inside of that Recipe Images collection. If I press the keyboard shortcut B, it's actually going to remove that image from the target collection. So I'd like to add it back into that collection. I'll press that shortcut B once again, and now the image that's highlighted has been added back to that collection. If I want to add other images, I'll just click on the image and then press B. This is a great way to add photos to a collection when you happen to be looking through a lot of different folders and you just see a photo you want to add, you just click it and then press that keyboard shortcut and it adds it really quickly. Now I have my collection all ready to go. Let's go ahead and start making the book. Let's go ahead and begin creating the book. I have the collection that I'd like to use highlighted inside of that collections panel. On the top right, I'm going to go ahead and click on that book option. If you don't see book, then you'll need to hover off to the side and right-click and make sure that you have it checked there. You can customize the view, so if you happen to do that in the past and you remove that book view, then it might be hidden. So I'll go ahead and go over to book and click once. As soon as I do that, it auto-generates a book for me. So if I scroll all the way up to the top, I can see that it just kind of placed the photos in order of where they were inside of the collection. I'll be using a different auto layout setup for this recipe book. But for now, I'm going to go up to the very top and let's take a look at the book settings. One of the nice things about using the book module inside of Lightroom is that you can send it straight to Blurb, which is a book and publishing site, and you can have it printed through them. So whatever you create inside of here can actually be printed as a real book. If you click on the book dropdown, you have some different options here. A Blurb photo book is probably going to be a little bit more expensive, but the quality is going to be really good for all of the printed pages and the photographs. There's also a magazine option, so the size format's going to be a little bit different and the paper quality is going to be different. There's also a trade book, which is kind of more for written text. Paper quality isn't going to be quite as high as with a photo book. There's also the option to print it as either a PDF or a JPEG. And when you choose these options, you can then just export the book, so that way you can print it wherever you like, or you can kind of combine everything and share it online. And I'm going to go ahead and show the PDF and the JPEG option towards the end here once I've actually kind of finalized my book layout. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and start out with a Blurb photo book. And then you get to choose your size. So if I click on the size, right now it's set to a 10 by 8 standard landscape. But you can choose a small square. I'll go ahead and click on this. And when I do that, it's basically going to remind me that everything is going to change on my layout. Now, I highly recommend that when you are making a book inside of Lightroom that you choose all of these settings before you actually start laying out your book. Because once you have a lot of text and photos and everything in here positioned where you want, changing the size is going to change how it looks. And so it's a lot easier to just kind of make that decision right off the bat. For now, I'm just going to go through some of these so you can see what the different layouts look like. So this is just a standard small square. You can also make it more of a portrait size. There's large landscape, which would be really beautiful for a big photo book. And then there's also a large square. So for this book, I'm going to choose standard landscapes. The goal here is to create what kind of looks like a recipe book. I don't actually have recipes for all of my photos here, but I wanted to kind of show you the process so you can actually see how this works, and then you can kind of apply this to your own photographs and your own book layouts. So I've changed that size back to the standard landscape. Next, you get to choose what your cover is going to look like. And you'll also notice down here at the bottom, there's an estimated price dropdown. And if I click this, I can see what some of the other currencies look like. It's a nice way to give you an idea of how much your book is going to cost with all of the settings that you have there, so that way you don't make something that costs a ridiculous amount of money. So right now it's set to that hardcover image wrap. If I were to choose, let's say, soft cover, that price there is going to go way down. Paper type, you have some different options. If you are interested in printing through Blurb, I do recommend that you go to blurb.com and take a look at their options and maybe see if you can get a sample set of the different paper types. That way you really have a good idea of what you're printing. I'll just go ahead and keep this at that top premium luster. But if you were to choose a different one, such as standard, that price is going to drop a little bit. And of course, that price is also going to change depending on how many pages you have in the book. There's an option here for a logo. So if you have it set to on, your price is going to go down. But if you scroll to the bottom and go to that last page there, make this a little bit larger, there's a Blurb logo there. So if you don't want that there, then, I recommend that you change that logo page to off, and then that logo will disappear. But you are going to pay a little bit more for removing that branding. Now let's discuss the layout here. So when I clicked the book option at the top, it pulled all those photos from the collection and just did an auto layout. Let's go ahead and check that auto layout panel and see what it looks like. The default preset here shows that the left page is blank, and on the right there's going to be one photo added. So what it did is it went off of that and it just auto-populated the entire book so that it looks exactly like what that preset shows. If I click on the drop-down, there are a few other options. So let's go ahead and select a different one. I'll choose that next one on the list. And before I can actually generate this, I need to clear the layout. So I'm going to click Clear Layout, and then I'll click Auto Layout once again. Now this looks pretty similar to the one that I just had, but if I zoom in a little bit closer, you can see that there's some photo text. I'm actually going to collapse that left panel there so we can see things a little bit larger, and there's a photo text added to the top. I'll go back to that grid view there. Let's see what the last one here looks like. One photo per page. This might be a good option if you are just generating a quick photo book that you maybe want to share or print for a client. So this is a good one to work with. Again, let's clear that layout and then click Auto Layout once again. So now I just have a big photo book with all of my photos zoomed in. This obviously would still need some work. The front cover, of course, and the back cover would need some editing or just to change those photos out. I need to remove my bio photo and put that somewhere else. But for the most part, this would probably work pretty well as a portfolio type of setup. However, there may still be things about this you don't like, and maybe you want to quickly generate a photo book, but based on your own kind of choice of page setups, because there are a lot of different ways that you can organize the pages and set up your photos and text inside of the book module. So let's go ahead and click on the preset dropdown, and I'm going to go into the Edit Auto Layout preset. So here I can actually choose what I want the left and the right side to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up for the layout that I want to work with for my recipe book. So I'm going to click on this drop down here on the left, and what I'd like to do is select Fixed Layout. This allows me to actually choose the layout that I want to work with. So I'll scroll through these so you can see some of the options for the one photo setup. If you had a portfolio book, you might want to work with something more along the lines of the vertical or the horizontal setup, so it's not zoomed all the way in. For my setup, I'm going to go with that one photo that just fills the whole page and kind of bleeds over the edges. I want to make sure that it actually fills the image in the whole amount, and that's all I'm going to do for that left side. For the right side, I'd like to set up a text page. So I'm going to click this drop down, and you can see there are a lot of different options that you can work with. For this setup, I'm going to work with the text page, and I'll just scroll down so you can see the different options there. And I'm just going to go ahead and work with the simple full page of text. So I'll click on that. I don't have to worry about the photos or the photo text because I don't have any images that are going into this page. So this looks great. I'm going to click Save. And now I'm just going to give this a name. So I'll call this my recipe book. And then I'll click Create. Now if I go over to that preset once again, I have it on my list. I'm going to go ahead and clear the layout and then click Auto Layout. And now all of my photos are added here, and they're basically ready for me to start working on my pages and adding my recipes. Before you get too far into customizing and creating and laying out your book, I highly recommend that you create a saved book. If you were to exit out of the book module and start looking at maybe other photos or other collections, it's very likely that you will lose your progress with this book. To create a saved book, click the button on the top right that says Create Saved Book. Give it a name. And then choose where you want to save it. Right now it's set to save inside of the collection of images that I have, and that's a great place for it to kind of hang out. But maybe you have a collection that's only for all of your books, so that might be a good place as well. So I'm going to go ahead and keep this kind of set to that default setting there and click Create. Now in the upper left part of this window, it actually shows the name of the book that I'm working on. If I go over to that left panel in the collections, now I have that Nicole's recipe book there as an actual book. But now I'm able to navigate away from this and go back to it. And as I make changes to the book, it's going to auto-save, so I don't have to worry about it going forward. Let's go ahead and create a title page for the recipe book. I'm going to select this page 1 over here on the left. I'll make sure that the page is highlighted. And then I want to set this to spread view. So if I click this icon on the bottom there, the spread view icon, it allows me to see the pages side by side. You can also view kind of a single page view if you want to really focus on one page, but I prefer the spread view because this is how the book is going to look when it's opened up. This left page here is not actually a page, it's the inside of the cover, so you can't add anything to that page. This page on the right is going to be where I put my title and the byline. So I'm just going to start out by typing out the name of this recipe book, and I'm just going to call this recipe book Yummy Food. So I'll type Yummy Food. Now I obviously don't want that text to be all the way up in that top left corner. I need to make some edits to it. So I'm going to go over to the right and I'm going to select the type panel. First, I'll start out by centering the paragraph. So I'll click the option to center the text. And then I also want to vertically align it in the center as well. So I'll click that other button there on the right. Next, I want to start playing around with the font and the size and some other type settings. So what I need to do first is highlight the text. Now over on the right, I'm going to change my font And I'm going to scroll down and find kind of a fancy font here. I have one here that I've added to my computer called Playlist. So I'll add that. And then, of course, I need to increase the size so I can see it nice and big. So I'll take that size and really make it large. There's a drop down here on the right, and this allows me to see some other options. So I'll click that little drop down, and now I can work with the tracking, the baseline, and the leading. You don't really have to worry about what all of these means. If you're not sure, just go ahead and scroll and see what they do. And if you want to reset any of your sliders, just go over to the slider name and double click it. It'll take it back to the default. But I would like to kind of shift the baseline, and this is basically just going to push the text up or down. So if I move it to the left, it's going to kind of push it down, and if I move it to the right, it'll push it up. This just kind of helps me to kind of position that text so it's a little bit higher up, and anything I put below it is going to have a little bit of distance. Now I'm going to go back into that page, and I'm going to give myself some credit for making this book. So I'll press the return key, and I'll just go ahead and type by Nicole S. Young. Now, I don't want this font or size or really anything about it to be exactly the same as the title of the book. So I'm going to highlight all of this text, just the bottom part. I'm going to change my font, and I'll just set it to Open Sans. I'm going to reset that baseline back to 0, so I will double-click that baseline slider. And I'm also going to reduce the size. So this page is pretty much set. But one thing that you can do that will really help you out, whether it's on the book you're working on or maybe on other books you plan on creating down the road, is to create text style presets. So right now I have my author name highlighted, and if I go over to the top right of the type settings and click that drop down, I can go down and save these settings as a new preset. So I'll go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is just say by Nicole S. Young. That way I know that if I ever need to use this type of setup in another book, I at least have a pretty good starting place. So I'll go ahead and click Create. Now let's do the same for the title. I'm going to highlight the title here. Just want to make sure that it's only that title selected and not my actual name down there. It kind of looks like it's highlighted, but I think that's just how the baseline is making it look. So I have that ready to go. I'm going to click on the drop down, save this as a new preset, and I'll just call this the title page title. And I'll go ahead and click Create. I spelled it wrong, so let me go in there and edit that. So I'm going to rename that preset. And let's rename that to a little bit better spelling, rename. I also think I'd like to rename the author name one and just give it that title page kind of description at the front. So I have that set there. I'm just going to click on that preset, and then I'm going to go down to rename preset, and I'll go ahead and I'll give it kind of that same format there so it's a little bit easier to find down the road. The next page I'd like to create is the About the Author page. That's going to be the very next page after the title page. So I'll go ahead and click on one of those pages to highlight it, and then I'm going to set it to that spread view. Now, I don't want to have my big photo here as a giant page. I'm just going to set this to be a blank page. So I can delete this photo, so I have it selected. I'll just press that delete key. Another thing I can do is change the page layout from either this page location or over on the right. And I'll show you both methods here. First, I'll go ahead and change this left page layout. So I'm going to click that little arrow on the very bottom right of that page that I have selected. And I'm just going to set this to just a simple text page. So it should just be a blank page when it's printed or saved. Now let's go over to the right and address the text page. So what I'd like to add here is my photo along with some text. I could use this drop down on the right to choose a page that I'd like to use, but instead I'm going to go up to the right, I'm going to drop down the page panel, And there's a drop down here that's pretty much the same as the one you saw previously, but I find it's a little bit easier to actually work with this panel when choosing a page instead of clicking on the little drop down on the page itself. So I'm going to go ahead and select the one photo spreads, and I'll just scroll through and see what all the options are. There's some pretty good options, but I definitely want a photo with text. And it looks like this option at the very bottom is probably going to be the best fit. So there's a photo here that I can add, and then there's also a text box on the right. First, I'll go ahead and take my photo and drop it into the box. So I'll click that image inside of the film strip at the bottom, and then just drag it right over the top, and now I have my photo set. Now I'd like to add some text into this box. If I go into the type panel on the right, I can use the text style preset to choose one of those presets that I actually created for the title page. So I'll just select that title page preset. Now it's going to be a little bit ridiculously large and it's not going to fit perfectly, but it does have some of the settings where I want them to be. So I'll just go ahead and start typing. And now I can go ahead and edit and make some changes to this text to fit a little bit better on this page. So I'm just going to highlight all of that text, and I'm going to make a few adjustments here to these sliders. First, I'm going to change the size. So I'm just going to reduce that size, maybe go a little bit smaller. I'm going to reset the baseline, and I'm also going to set that text so it's aligned to the left. Now we'll go to the end of the text line and press my Return or Enter key, and this is where I'm going to put my other text, so my actual About info. I don't actually have About info prepared. Instead, I'm going to use filler text. And this is a good option for you if you know you're making a book and you know you have some areas that you want to kind of fill with text, but you don't really know what to put there. Before I do that, though, I'm going to make a few adjustments here to the actual text settings. First, I'm going to change the font to Open Sans, and I'm going to reduce the size. And I'm just going to type in here so I can just kind of see what it looks like. I might want it to be a little bit smaller, so I'll go ahead and highlight all this text, and I'll reduce that size a little bit more. I'll play around with the spacing. I'll probably have to put a hard return there when I actually get the text pasted over. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a website called lipsum.com. And lorem ipsum is kind of the default filler text that a lot of designers use with their work. So if you go down to the bottom here, you can select how many paragraphs or whatever you want. I'm just going to do one paragraph of text. I'll click Generate Lorem Ipsum. And now I can just copy. I don't need this whole thing. I'm probably just going to copy part of the section here. So I'll just go ahead and do a Command or Control C, go back over to my page, and then just Command or Control V to paste all of that text. If I want to kind of double it up, maybe I'll paste it again. So now I have a good amount of text to work with. I'm going to go to the end of the title and just do a hard return there so I have some nice spacing in between that top part and my actual text. I'm going to highlight all of this text and just kind of make it look a little bit cleaner and smaller. So I'll go over to that size. I'm going to click inside of the size box and just use my arrow key to go down a little bit. I'm also going to see what it looks like if I use the justification settings. I'll go ahead and just use that default setting there. Next, I'm going to kind of play with the leading, and this should give some space in between my lines. I don't want that much space, though. And that's looking pretty good. I'm going to click away from it, though, so I can actually see what it looks like, without all of that stuff highlighted. And of course, this would look a little bit different. I may need to make some adjustments if I were to actually fill this with some actual about info, whatever I'm going to write about myself. But this is looking pretty good the way it looks right now. Now, another thing you may want to do is you may want to preview your pages without all of the guidelines around it. You see, like all of those gray borders, those are not actually going to print. That's just kind of giving you an indication of where the boundaries of your book and the boundaries of your things like your images and your text boxes are kind of located. So if you go up to the guides panel on the right, this is where you can actually choose to view things. Now there's also, if you notice here, there's also a box here for filler text. So if I were to click that, then over on the left there, it actually filled that blank page with filler text. So that's also an option for you if you want to see what that looks like. You can see a page grid if you'd like to kind of really see how everything is lined up. And then guidelines are if you are moving things around. If I click on this, it's going to kind of give me a little bit more indication of where things are kind of sitting on the page. Now, if you don't want to see any of the guides on your page when you're working on your book, go ahead and uncheck the Show Guides box at the top. Now, when you deselect a page or click away from it, you have a nice, clean preview of exactly what your book will look like once it's printed or saved. Let's go ahead and start adding recipes to this book. I'm going to select a page and then open it up into Spread View. I have a recipe over here that I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste. So I'll select the text and then copy it. Now I'll go back over to my book and paste that text. The text is pasted, but I'd like to make some adjustments to what the fonts look like. I'll go ahead and access the type panel over on the right, and I'll start out with the title of the recipe. So what I need to do is highlight that text, and then I'll choose a font. I'll increase the size. And when I have everything set to where I want it to be, I'm going to save this as a text style preset. So in the top right of this panel, I'll click this drop down and select Save Current Settings as a new preset. I'll call this Recipe Title. Now let's tackle some of the other areas of this recipe. I'll go ahead and highlight the ingredients type. I'll go ahead and change this font. Slightly increase that size. I'll go ahead and make it bold. I'm also going to increase the leading to push it down just a touch, and I'll go ahead and save this as a preset as well. So I'll click that drop down on the top right, select Save Current Settings, and I'll call it Recipe Subtitle. Next, I will highlight all of those ingredients. I'm going to change the font once again. And I'll go ahead and just keep the size as is. But I'm still going to save this as a new text style preset. So I'll repeat those steps, save the current settings, and just call this one Recipe Text. Now all I need to do is apply those styles to the other sections. So I'll highlight the directions, click the Text Style Preset dropdown, and then select Recipe Subtitle. And then I'll do the same with all of those directions, and I'll change this one to Recipe Text. So now that all of my styles are set and ready to go, I can easily copy and paste other recipes to the other pages and just make these subtle changes to all of the text. So let's go ahead and do that. I have kind of a generic recipe here. It's basically just all filler text. I'm just going to go ahead and select all of the text, copy it. I'll go back over to that book, and let's go to the next page. I'll click on the page where I want the text to go and paste it. Now I'll go ahead and start applying those styles. So I'll select the title and choose the recipe title. Next, I'll select the ingredients. I'll just highlight that word and change this to Recipe Subtitle, and I'll just keep going down and making these changes until all of the styles are set. So now you can see how easy it is to apply the same types of text styles to different pages without having to go through that tedious process of selecting the font, the size, and all of those other things that go along with it. Let's go ahead and add some page numbers to this layout. On the right, I'll go ahead and select the page panel, and then I'll click Page Numbers. Under Location, you can decide where you want the page numbers to go. I'll go ahead and choose Bottom Corner, and I'd only like these to display on the right side. I don't want them to overlap over the photos. So I'll click this drop-down and select Right Only. You can also easily stylize the text of the page numbers. Just go down to the page number and highlight it, then go over to that Type panel, and you can increase the size, or maybe even change the font. And now as I scroll through each page, you'll notice that the font and size of the page number has changed. So whatever you do to any of the page numbers, it's going to apply globally to all page numbers on all pages. When the photos are added into the Lightroom book, kind of as that auto layout, you'll probably still want to make some adjustments to how the photos actually appear. For example, this photo is pushed a little bit too far to the left, and I'd like to rearrange it in the frame. To do that, I simply click inside of the image and then just drag it until I get it to where I'd like. You can also use the zoom feature if you'd like to zoom your photo in a bit. And I think that looks pretty good. Then you can just use the arrows at the bottom to find the photos that you'd like to kind of rearrange. Here's a good one. So I'll go ahead and click on the photo and then drag up. And this is a vertical image, so it's not going to let me move it from left to right. So instead, I'm just going to zoom it in a bit and then nudge it over to the left just a touch. And then you just keep going through the photos and arranging them so they look great inside of your book. Another thing you can do inside of the book module is change the background design. Let's go ahead and start by accessing the background panel. Now there are two different ways that you can apply backgrounds. You can apply them either to individual pages, so you can have a different background for each page, or you can select one design and apply it globally across the entire book. Let's go ahead and start out just by adding one background to one page. First, you want to make sure that you activate or click on the page that you want to add the background to. Then you choose your background with this picker here. If you'd like to use a photo or a pre-made design that you have inside of your Lightroom catalog, go ahead and drag and drop it over to the spot where it says Drop Photo here. That photo will appear. It's a little bit translucent, so you can always play around with the opacity to make it even more or less visible. Or you can click the drop down here and select from some of the pre-made backgrounds. There are two main categories: travel and wedding. So click one of those and it will apply to your page. You can also change the color of what that graphic looks like. So right now it's dark black, but you could actually alter the color just by using the color picker here as well. You can also set the background color to be something a little bit different. So if I click that background color, default is white, but you can choose a different color with this color picker. If I were to go to the next page, you'll notice that the background that I selected is not on these other pages. However, if I check the box that says Apply Background Globally, now if I go through all of the pages, that same background appears on every single page. Let's go ahead and create the cover. If you don't have cover images already to go, you can use the existing photos in your Lightroom catalog to create your cover. I'll go ahead and click on the cover and then bring it into spread view. Next, I'm going to change the layout. So I'm going to click the drop down on the bottom right, and I'll scroll down and choose one of these covers to work with. The first thing I'd like to do here is change the cover image. So I'm just going to click on that page to make sure that it's active. Next, I'm going to scroll through my images and find a photo I'd like to replace it with, and then drag and drop it over kind of just on the edge there of that picture and release. Then I'm just going to click and move that photo so it's positioned a little bit better. Now you can see that there's a box here, and this is a text box. So I'm going to click inside of this, and then I'm going to type the title of the book. So we're calling this Yummy Food by Nicole S. Young. Now I'd like to stylize this title. So I'll go ahead and highlight that title at the top, and I'll go over to my text style presets, and I'm going to select the recipe title to see how that works. And that seems to actually be a really good fit for the cover title. I also need to make some edits to my name there, so I'll go ahead and highlight that. And I'll just change that leading and push it down a little bit. And that's looking pretty good there. Now over on the left, I have a whole bunch of photo boxes that I can work with. Instead of having to drag and drop single photos into each of those boxes, I can easily drag and drop a whole bunch of them at once. But first, I'm going to go over to the Guides panel and make sure that I can see all of the guides. Then I'll go down to the bottom in that thumbnail view, and I don't know exactly how many photos I have here and exactly how many boxes I have, but I'll just select all of my images to be on the safe side. I'll probably have a few more than I need. Then I just click and drag, and then just drop it over those boxes, and it adds them all into those cells. It looks like I have one left over, so I'm just going to right-click over this extra image and choose the Remove Selected Cell. Now you could go through each of these individual cells here with these photos, and you might want to reposition where some of the photos and how they're actually zoomed in and positioned. I'm not going to do that here, but it's something you can do pretty easily. But what I am going to do, though, is I am going to go into this box here, and I have some kind of filler text that I'm just going to go ahead and paste here. And of course, I could highlight all of this text, go over to that type section. I could change this back down to maybe one of my presets. And you can even play with some of the other options down there as well. But now I have a cover that's a lot more appropriate for my recipe book. Lastly, let's go ahead and export the book. Now, if you wanted to send this to Blurb and go ahead and print it, you could easily do that. There's a button at the bottom. Just click that book and walk through those steps. However, if you'd like to export it as a PDF or JPEG files, you'll want to go up to the book settings at the top right and change the book to either PDF or JPEG. Let's go ahead and start with PDF. You won't want to change anything in regards to the size or the cover, or that's going to alter the layout of your book. But you can select the JPEG quality, the color profile, resolution, sharpening, and media type. So media type would be what you intend to print it on. I'm going to leave most of these settings the same, but I am going to increase the JPEG quality up to 100. I want my photos to look their very best. Then I'll go down to the bottom right and click Export Book to PDF. The pop-up is telling me that I have some photos with transparency, but I'm really not too concerned about that. I know all of my images are just standard photos, so I'll go ahead and click OK. And then I'll just give this a name. And I'll click Save. Now let's take a peek and see how these PDFs exported. The cover exports separately from the insides of the book. And the inside of the book is exactly what you saw inside of Lightroom, just in PDF format. Now let's go ahead and export using the JPEG option. In the book settings, I'll change it to JPEG. I'll keep everything as is except for the JPEG quality. I'll increase that to 100. I'll click Export Book to JPEG. I get that same notice. I'll go ahead and click OK. And I'm going to create a new folder for this and just call it JPEGs. And give it, again, Yummy Food. And then click Save. Let's take a look at the results from the JPEG export. Each page, including the cover, has been exported as a separate JPEG file. Thanks so much for joining me in this video training. To learn more about me and my work, please visit nicolesy.com.